Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to episode 4 of Mental Hellness. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm wearing my spectacles today because I'm taking on a little bit more of an intellectual approach. No, I'm not really. I just didn't feel like putting my contacts in today. So I'm super excited that you've decided to join in and watch today. I have another amazing guest. Suzan Mazur is going to join us. Suzan is a television producer and comedy writer. She is also, and I can say from personal experience because I know this, an amazing photographer. She does it all. And she does it all while managing her depression, anxiety, and ADHD, if that's not enough. Suzan started doing stand-up comedy a few years ago as a way to confront or cope with her anxiety, which she says has changed her in a lot of good ways. And I think that's a great example of finding an outlet that speaks to you, that helps you to manage when things get tough. So we want to talk to her about that as well. So without further ado, there's so much to talk about. Let's admit Suzan. Da, 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 da. Suzan.
Oh, hello.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
I'm so good. It's so nice to see you.
It is so nice to see you as well.
It's been a while. I was just saying nice things about you.
Oh.
And that you are, among other things, an amazing photographer who actually made this face look.
You were a very easy subject to work with.
See, I'm digging, fishing for those compliments.
I mean, you pushed through. Didn't you have like a neck or a shoulder that you threw out a muscle or something?
Back injury.
You soldiered through that photo session, my friend. That was
great. That was awesome. Yeah, amazing. So listen, this is episode 4. So I've been doing these chats, and I'm finding out so much about people and so much about mental hellness in general. And so I would be remiss in not asking right off the top, how are you dealing with the crazy right now with the COVID and that?
Amazingly well, but I've had a very unique situation where at the very beginning of the lockdown, like everybody else, I was home for about 4 weeks before I got a phone call for some work, which was being done remotely, and just having a daily routine and talking to people every day and having people that I needed to talk to every day helped so much. Like I honestly don't know how I would have handled all of the crazy without having that routine and having people to talk to on a daily basis.
For sure, right? To be accountable to somebody other than yourself. That's what I found was the most challenging part of all this. I've said before that for me, I'm such a professional at panicking that I just kind of rolled the anxiety that goes with pandemic, into my regular day to day. But you're right, to have to be responsible for something or to something takes you outside of your head.
It does, absolutely. Whether it's something that somebody else is bringing to you, or for the first 4 weeks I tried really hard to create that accountability to myself, whether it was making sure, having a checklist every day, making sure I went for a walk, making sure I did some reading, making sure I had things that I needed to do that sort of gave me like a purpose every day.
Right.
Yeah.
The purpose, and I think also being able to be gentle with ourselves too when we can't necessarily find the purpose.
For sure.
It doesn't necessarily come easily. And I think it's okay in talking with other people and finding that so many of us are either really productive one day and then not at all the next day, and to somehow be okay with that kind of chaos.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's really key. I know a lot of people are, at the beginning of the pandemic, were like, if you don't come out of this with learning a new language or whatever, that's okay. Like,
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you get swept up in the baking phenomena?
I did not. I managed to escape that, but I will tell you, I got into fermenting.
I saw this. Tell me about this. I saw this on your Instagram, and then I felt really uncool because I didn't know what you were doing.
fermenting kind of like a form of pickling, only you basically kimchi is fermented, and
Okay.
you can ferment cabbage to make sauerkraut, and all of it also just has like really good bacteria for your stomach. And I started reading about this, and I'm like, I've always loved fermented stuff and pickled stuff, and like I've always craved that. Even, it's an ongoing joke, pregnant women crave pickles. I've never been pregnant, but I always crave pickles. So I started making my own batches of kimchi and sauerkraut, and it's been really interesting. It's not as messy as pickling, where you
Okay.
have like you have to boil the vinegar and boil everything or whatever. It's basically just like, salt water and cabbage, and you let it sit, and it ferments, and it's
And
delicious.
do you have a supply now? Like, are you going to start your own side hustle?
I don't think so. Just to do one head of Napa cabbage is like maybe a half an hour of prep and putting it together, and that's it for me. Like
Yeah.
that's all I need. That's, yeah,
That's the joy is confined to 30 minutes, right?
for sure, for sure.
Now I wonder, because we've just said, the 30 minutes, and it puts me in mind of your ADHD, which I talked
Mhm.
about in your intro. And I can also relate to that, having that also on my long list of diagnoses. I wonder, has that sort of played into to the good or to the not good through this process?
It's played into the good whenever I've been able to hyper focus on something. It's
Yeah.
been helpful. But it really just, like most people, if I mention to them that I have a diagnosis of ADHD, they're like, what? But you're so organized. And I'm like, yeah, I work really hard to get to that point. And like, you don't see all of that process that goes into it. So it's worse I found it's worse in the normal world, a quote unquote normal world. And in this
Oh,
new world, it's almost, I just kind of feel like I have more breathing room to be able to work through all of the little coping mechanisms that I've come up with, or developed over the years.
it's interesting that you say that about the hyper focus, because I think a lot of people who don't have
My
any
battery's gonna die. One sec.
all
I
right.
forgot to plug in my laptop. Sorry. Okay, we're good.
Awesome. Awesome. I think a lot of people who don't have experience with ADHD really are surprised to hear about the hyper focus, about the way that we are able to laser focus on something, almost to the point of excluding everything else. I think that is often a surprise to people.
Absolutely. But we're also very good at juggling multiple things when that is required. Well, some people are. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, once you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Like, everybody has
Hallelujah.
completely different, mannerisms and whatever. I find that I can multitask pretty well with my organization systems, but
Mhm.
yeah, the laser focusing on thing is something that people don't really realize.
It's interesting, and I didn't really. I mean, I have the diagnosis, and I do not multitask. That is something that is a real struggle for me. Well, that's maybe not necessarily 100% true. I multitask, meaning I start a bunch of things. So
Yeah, that's what, yeah,
there's tasks going, they're just never quite tied off or finished. But
for sure.
the hyper focus really was introduced to me when my son was diagnosed, because I would watch him just laser in on something and nail it, and then everything else could be falling apart around him.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he
I mean,
would.
multitasking is really a myth. Like, you can't actually be working on more than one thing at once. Let's be honest.
True.
But yeah,
True.
we can certainly have 20 projects going on at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so how does that, if you are dealing with anxiety at the same time, do you ever find that, and I think about this too, do your diagnoses ever fight with each other?
Oh, 100%. That's a really interesting question. 100%. I think so, especially when you're dealing with anxiety and ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have all of these coping mechanisms that help me most of the time stay organized. And if I am in a position where I can't use those coping mechanisms, whether other people are sort of challenging me or wanting me to do things a different way, my anxiety gets starts to take over and is like, no, like I really, like I hook my teeth into, I really need to do this because otherwise I'm going to completely freak out. I really need to do it this way. So yeah,
Wow.
they totally compete with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's they don't necessarily like each other. They
Mhm.
never compliment each other. When you're, especially if you're throwing actually, it's like anxiety is like the monkey wrench of all, I think, the diagnoses. Because when I'm dealing with depression, for example,
Mhm.
um, in a really low point, and I think people don't often realize this either. When you're in a low point, you can still be super anxious.
Yes.
It's like the anxiety is always trying to claw at you.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
wants it wants a piece of the action.
It kind of does. It's like that annoying friend that always wants an invite to the party, but they always make an ass of themselves. So yeah, no, it's so true. I've never thought about that before. Thanks for bringing this up in a conversation. Yeah.
Well, this is completely selfish why I'm doing this little show, because I'm learning so much about how other people manage or even mismanage, because I think those conversations are important to have too.
For
I mean,
sure.
while it's great to hear, hey, what do you do and what sort of tips and techniques do you have, I think it's also important um, to be able to laugh at ourselves, but to also say, sometimes I really fucked this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And to be okay with that too.
I think so. And I think it makes us more human. And I
Mhm.
think that for people who are maybe hesitant to even talk about their own mental health, when we're able to have a little bit of a platform when we say, you know what, it's okay, because we're all crazy to a certain extent. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody has mental health issues.
Yeah.
It's just where you are on the continuum.
Yeah, and to be able to have that conversation with people who have that same level of self-awareness. Like you said, everybody has some level of mental health issues. And I think a weird thing that's happened in the pandemic is that it's I don't know whether it's because we've been home and our lives have been disrupted, but a lot more people are becoming more self-aware and
Hmm.
able to look at themselves and go, this is something that I should maybe dive into a little bit and maybe talk to other people about. But when you can relate with somebody else like this, the episodes that you have so far are just wonderful because they're relatable to almost everyone to a certain extent. You know what I mean?
Thank
And it's really great to have those conversations.
Thanks. I it's just fascinating to me because um, one of the challenges that I've had over the last few years in talking about mental health a little more openly is you realize that there are going to be those people that are not going to have the conversation with you for love nor money. They're just not going to do it. And I've had to learn to dial back my soapbox a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
you want to create a platform where it's okay. But I've learned that there are people too that they're just not there. They just don't want to. It's just not in their space to want to do it. Have you found that at all? Have you ever tried
Absolutely.
talking about your, being open about your mental health and being shut down?
It's really funny because I've had this conversation with a friend of mine multiple times where, she's my one of my BFFs. So we talk about almost everything, and we'll sometimes just get on one person who's really, really wearing on us, and we're just like, oh my God, I wish this person would just like go to therapy or something. And we sort of we have to stop ourselves in mid conversation and readjust our perception and go, listen, this person, not everyone has spent as much time in the chair as we have, and we really just have to accept that and acknowledge it more so, and just kind of go, let people have their come around in their own time, whether it's you feel like they could benefit from the process, or you're ashamed to share with them because you feel like they're going to judge you or they're not really on the same level. I mean, I think we've all had that same experience with dealing with a multitude of people who either accept our mental health concerns or are kind of judgmental of it or try to use it as an excuse,
Yeah.
against your actions or your behavior.
Yeah.
And yeah, you really do have to step back and go, not everybody spent as much time in the chair, and that's okay.
And maybe they never will.
And
And
maybe they
and that's
never will.
and it's interesting because I have always found it. I think I'm at a place now where I can see the humor in it and I'm not so offended. But I've spent a lot of years where if I react to something or if I behave in a certain way, there are people in my life that will automatically roll their eyes and sort of assign my mental illness to it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I could just be having an honest to God emotional reaction to something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are those people that no matter what you do, no matter what you say, oh, it's because she's,
100%. And I'm a very like outspoken or the right amount of spoken person. Like I will
Yeah.
speak my mind and I will say my opinions. And I understand that some people won't agree with it or whatever, but it's when they turn around, they kind of go, oh, Susan's just crazy. It's like, please don't diminish my valid opinion on my mental health. Like, so.
And it's just so easy for people to do. And I think it creates, my mental health creates an out for you to not check your own behavior.
Yeah.
Or you get to act any way you want to act to me because, like you said, I'm just crazy. So you can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can behave in whatever way that you want. And that can be really challenging. I think I'm at a point in my life now where I can see that coming.
Mm-hmm. You really can. Yeah, for sure. Once you've, I guess, been in it for a while and been that self-aware for a while, yeah, you can really see it coming. And it's hard to, because you can't control other people's thoughts or perceptions of you. And whatever you say to someone is going to go through whatever filter that they're going through that day. And you have no control about it. And you kind of just have to, step back and go, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And it's hard. And and I think it's a lifelong process. And also too, as human beings, we just have regular old moods too. And sometimes we're just not in the mood to deal with other people's shit. Right?
Totally. 100%. Yeah.
So you said it in your bio, and I didn't really need your bio to know this because I know this about you. You started doing stand-up a few years ago now?
Like 10 years ago.
Wow. 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And you started that specifically as kind of an outlet or a way to confront sort of the anxiety that you deal with. Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm really interested.
Yeah. Well, I started doing stand-up comedy really as primarily as a creative outlet, but also as a way to challenge myself. One of the things that, like, I'll give you an example. I've been afraid of flying my whole life. Just terrified of it. Yeah, it's the most uncomfortable experience for me ever. And so what I did is I forced myself to get on airplanes and, with a little bit of a medicinal help from my doctor, got used to the experience. And it's still not comfortable, but it's tolerable now. Mm-hmm. So I did the same thing with performing and writing and performing stand-up. I just wanted to take myself out of my comfort zone and push myself past my anxiety and just see if I could do it. And I could. It wasn't a cure for anxiety for sure. I still get very anxious after, have a really great show one night, have a really good time with some friends, go home, pat myself on the back, and then I go to sleep, and then I wake up like 3 hours later in a full panic attack, just reliving the whole evening. Oh, I didn't get a laugh on that joke. What did I do wrong? And, I'm not doing this ever again. I'm not doing this ever again. And then 3 days later, I'd be up on stage again. So it's just a way of just challenging myself and pushing my boundaries a little bit.
I love that. That is such a great and difficult technique to sort of master. I'm right there with you with the flying. Yeah. And I've and stand up to a certain degree. Yeah. I've gotten to a point where if I want my world to get bigger, I need to do more of the things that scare me. Not to prove it to anybody else, but just to I guess I come back to that statement, making my world bigger. Because I find that with anxiety, right? Yeah. Anxiety can make your world really, really small.
It really can.
Yeah. Mental health issues can make your life, really, really small. And I'm chuckling to myself when you say that you could have a really good show, you do great, you pat yourself on the back, and then you go to bed and you can't let yourself just have that.
Yeah.
Because there's that annoying friend, anxiety.
Yeah.
Who
wants to be part of the party. Yeah.
Right. But wants to be bigger than you.
Exactly.
So, you think you did okay, but let me just point out all the little areas that you messed up or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like out of all of the illnesses, I think anxiety is the meanest.
It is. It really is. And like you say, like it just wants to take over the room. It wants to be on top and you know, at the forefront of everything. And you know, I feel like a lot more people, like we say, a lot more people are realizing that they have anxiety,
Mhm.
and they didn't really realize it before. Um, but yeah, it, it's
Do you
amazing.
get, is your anxiety physical?
It's not really physical. Sometimes it's physical.
Right.
Um, but like if it gets really bad, but it's a lot of it is just up in here and in here and the, you know, heart palpitations kind of thing, and just not being able to turn off that voice,
Right.
turn off that anxiety voice that's saying, oh, don't do that, oh, don't do that, oh, you know, don't say that, and oh, I can't believe you said that, oh, I can't believe you did this, you know, that voice in your head that kind of makes you stop and not push your boundaries and not, you know, get out of your comfort
It's
zone.
it's complete judgment, isn't it? Like
Mhm.
it's just judgment at every turn. And it comes back to that your world getting smaller, because I think for most people, we want to feel safe, right?
Mhm.
Want a sense of security and feel safe. And for those of us that manage that kind of anxiety on a regular basis, sometimes it's just easier not to fight that monster.
Totally.
So that's when you stay sitting on the couch,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
That's when you don't get up on the stage. You don't go, you know, walk down the gangplank to get on the plane,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the anxiety winning. I think the important message here is that you can battle it.
yeah.
You can. It's about finding what works for you, what makes sense. Because as you said at the beginning of the conversation, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person. If you met one person with anxiety, you've met one person with
Exactly.
anxiety,
Yeah,
because it's almost like these conditions are alter egos.
yeah, yeah. And also, just to add to that, if anxiety wins that one day, and you know you've spent the day on the couch and you've sat in your comfort zone, that's okay. You know, try again tomorrow. Don't beat yourself up over it, or allow yourself to get wrapped up in it. You know, sometimes it's going to win.
Yeah. And and I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think if anyone could take something away from this conversation, is that your anxiety may never ever go away and may never get a one-way ticket, you know, to hell. It'll it'll always
Yeah,
be there to some degree, trying to push the buttons,
yeah,
trying to, I always think of my anxiety as driving my car. And
yeah.
it always, and I can tell first thing in the morning if the anxiety has the car keys or not.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And then how do I wrestle those keys away?
yeah.
Um, so if we, before we wrap up though, the
Mm.
conversation, what I always like to ask is, what would you like to say to viewers? What would be a pearl of Susan wisdom, or something that you would want people to know so they could come away feeling okay?
I think it's kind of just that, like, feel okay, like be okay. One of the turning points in my mental health journey was when I realized to myself, this is something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. Like, you go to the gym because you're trying to lose weight or build muscle, or you go to the doctor to get a vaccine or whatever, so you don't get sick. You don't go to a therapist to cure this. Like, you can work on it, and maybe, bless people who are completely, cured of it, but it's always going to be there, and that's okay. The point is finding ways to manage it where it just doesn't take over your life, where your anxiety doesn't take over your life and depression doesn't take over your life, and building those support systems around you, like having the confidence to build those support systems around you, and that all of these things are okay. And it's really just about taking the first step and diving in, diving into it,
I
diving
love
into
it.
that self-awareness. Yeah.
Self-awareness and finding your supports too,
Yeah.
like you say. And where your supports don't exist, then don't pursue them.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely. If you are in toxic relationships or toxic family, it is okay to divest yourself of that and focus on you. And I think that's maybe a secondary point and a little nugget of wisdom is that sometimes we get so caught up in caring, focusing on the people around us, or we're taught that if we focus on ourselves, it's very selfish and being selfish is a bad thing. It's not. Focus on yourself, divest yourself of any toxic relationships. That doesn't mean they're gone for good. It's just, it's okay to work on you and keep those over here for now and maybe come back to them later.
I think that's really, really wise. And I think people need to hear that. I mean, I think they really need to hear that, and they need to internalize it as part of the process, because I do think we split ourselves into so many parts, and we try to contort ourselves into different versions of ourselves for different people. And sometimes maybe that's necessary, but it can't be the whole picture of how we live our lives.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Because then we lose sight of the amazingness that is us.
That is us. That is us as individuals and as together. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, Suzan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
We could just keep talking, but it's so, I just really, really, I'm grateful, and I respect so much that you're willing to open up this way and share with people, because I do think this is a service. I think that, people watching are going to see themselves, and they're going to, even if they never, maybe they don't run out to the chair right away, or maybe they don't run out and have these conversations, but even if something inside them says, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's not just me. We're all a little bit nuts, and that's okay.
And not to sit there and go, oh, maybe I have ADHD. Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. You can relate. I think people can relate to this whether they have diagnosis or not.
100%. I would like to say that everybody, maybe a disclaimer I should say, is you and I might have an anxiety disorder, but everybody experiences anxiety.
Yeah.
It's just where you are on the continuum. So I think that's probably important. I should make that point.
It's a great point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
That was Suzan Mazur. Amazing, amazing insight. I could just keep talking about anxiety and ADHD because I think that my brain is constantly full with those thoughts. And so I wonder if you can relate to that. The important thing to remember is that we all deal with anxiety and stress to some degree. It's about finding the ways that make sense for you to manage and to cope. So that's really kind of the takeaway I get from the conversation today. So whatever you take away from it, that's yours. And I hope you took something. Listen, don't forget, if you are liking the videos, to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel so that you will know whenever a new one pops up in your inbox. I would love to pop up in your inbox more often. So thanks very much, and be well.